If you haven't read it, you should, or even YouTube just some of his information. This is just kind of a little quote from the book that I think is really pertinent as a provider right now, but also as a parent. As parents, we are wired to try to save our children, but ultimately we can't. Rather than trying to shelter our children from life's inevitable difficulties, we can help them integrate those experiences into their understanding of the world and learn from them. So in terms of the families that I'm working with presently, this is kind of the big conundrum, right? Is that as parents, we try to protect our kids from the things that make them anxious, from the things that are distressing, difficult, that they're not successful at, those kinds of things. And then actually what we're creating is a bigger problem, because when they leave the care of their parents, they don't have the skills they need to be able to do those things on their own. So that shelter has really shortchanged them in the long run. As children develop, their brains mirror their parents' brains. That means that integrating and cultivating your own brain is one of the most loving and generous gifts you can give your children. So I don't know about any of you on the call that are parents, but as a parent, whenever I feel like I'm doing it wrong, or I should know better, or, you know, whatever, they're just not listening to me because, I don't know, they're disrespectful, you know, whatever it is, those things, when I feel ineffective, I become dysregulated. And when I'm dysregulated, I'm giving these dysregulated mirror neurons to my children. And so we're just going round and round and round and round. So if people are seeking help for their children, you know, I have an anxious teenager, I want her to come in and see you. The best thing they can also do is figure out how to get coping skills and regulation skills for themselves, because any difference that we're going to make in their kids is going to need to be reinforced through practice at home, which is typically with caregivers, right? And if the caregiver isn't regulated, then the progress isn't maintained. So in order for folks to be able to do that, they really have to kind of understand what does my brain do? What do I need to do to regulate it? So the left brain is very logical. It likes order. It likes things to be literal. It likes linguistics or words. And so the left brain likes to put things kind of in sequential order. You know, first we do this, then we do that. This is, if you have a really strong left-brained kiddo, they might say something to you like, well, I didn't push her, I shoved her. Or, you know, it's not late, we have one more day. Whereas as parents, we might be like, you waited to do this until the last minute. Like, well, it's not really the last minute, it's not due till tomorrow. The right brain, on the other hand, is much more holistic or nonverbal. So it likes to send and receive messages that help with communication. So facial expressions, eye contact, tone of voice, posture, gestures, all of those things. So instead of details and order, the right brain really cares more about the big picture, the meaning or the feeling of an experience versus like the factual details or tasks of it. The right brain tends to specialize in images, emotions, and personal memories. So the right brain can be more intuitive or emotional. And then the upstairs and downstairs brains, we also have to kind of understand. So Dan Siegel, and I'm sorry if this is information you all know, but I'm going to talk to you like you don't. So Dan Siegel uses the hand model of the brain. And so the reptilian brain is your limbic system, and it's down in the brain stem, right? So this is what's letting you make split-second decisions and things like that. And then your thinking brain or your mammalian brain, this is your prefrontal cortex, where good decision-making skills and things like that, executive function, are happening. And the reality is that most people's prefrontal cortex isn't done cooking until they're about 30 anyway. So, you know, even young adults are not working with a fully developed frontal lobe. But certainly if as a parent, if I come into the room and my kids are dysregulated and I flip my lid, and their lid is flipped, like nobody's really making great decisions in that point in time because we're all in our limbic system, which is our survival system. Also, I should say, if anybody has questions, thoughts, or opinions as you go along, you are more than welcome to blurt them out. So what are we supposed to do? So we talked about left and right brain and then upstairs and downstairs brain. And so as adults, our job is to help people integrate their brains. So keeping those distinct parts that have those important functions and helping them to work together as a whole. So how do we, help those different regions of the brain communicate and balance and link together as needed? And I mean, unfortunately, or fortunately, who knows, but it has to come from modeling from an adult. Like if kids had the ability to do this, that we wouldn't be meeting them. They wouldn't be coming into my office. They need those skills demonstrated and practiced on repeat because their brain is under construction all the time. So in theory, my brain is not, and I'm going to be able to model this integration through lower level and upper level thinking and balance of the horizontal and vertical integration. So what does that mean, or how would that look? So horizontally integrated brains, this lets people kind of value both logic and emotion, so they can kind of take things in and understand the world at large. So I was just doing my teenage group right before I walked into this, and I just love teenagers, first of all, but God bless them. One of them is about to graduate. And so she's much more regulated right now than she was when I met her weeks ago. And we were kind of joking about, like, if you overemphasize how terrible something is, will people believe you? And she said something like, yeah, I told everybody this morning I was going to die because my socks didn't match. Right. And she was able to see like the humor in that and kind of do it in a really dramatic way. But 6 weeks ago, she genuinely felt in her body like, I cannot go on with my day because my socks don't match. But she's gotten much more horizontally integrated so she can recognize the big emotion of like, it drives me nuts that they don't match. And like, no one's going to die today. It's going to be fine. It's all right. Right. But just also being able to obviously generalize that further than just your socks, to recognize like, I don't see things the same way that my family does. And that doesn't mean we have to go to battle. That might mean we can ask questions. That might mean I can try to perspective take with people. And then vertically integrated, this is kind of allowing that physically higher parts of your brain, so that prefrontal cortex that we were talking about, which is the part of your brain that makes decisions, manages time, engages in metacognition or thinking about thinking. That's this part of your brain, and helping this part of your brain interact with that lower level limbic system part of your brain. So in the example, if you considered the parts of the house, the lower level is meeting the basic needs. That's where our kitchen, our living room, the food, the relationships, the bathroom, where your basic needs are at, and letting that part of your brain connect with the physically higher part of the brain that lets us thoughtfully consider our actions. So your downstairs brain is going to include the brainstem and the limbic system. And that's in the lower part of the brain from the top of your neck to about the bridge of your nose is kind of where that's located. So when scientists are talking about this, they're really talking about those lower areas being more primitive because they're responsible for those basic functions: breathing, blinking, innate reactions like impulses and fight or flight, or strong reactions like anger and fear. So kind of like the first floor of a house. This is where basic needs are met. You walk in the door. It's where we cook the food, have the dining room, bathroom, that sort of thing. The upstairs brain is completely different. So this is more of the cerebral cortex and the various parts. So the upstairs brain is more involved in and can give you a fuller perspective on your world at large. So this is where some of those more intricate mental health processes take place, like thinking, imagining, planning, problem solving, right? So the upstairs brain is actually really sophisticated and controls a lot more of your important higher ordered and analytical thinking skills. And it's responsible for producing a lot of the characteristics you want to see in yourselves or your children. So like sound decision making and planning, control over emotions and body, self-understanding, empathy, and morality. So we want to raise good humans, right? And we have to make sure that their midbrain or limbic system is calmed down so that their upstairs brain can consider things like empathy and morality. The brain changes throughout the course of your life. So experience is the thing that really molds the brain. So as adults in the lives of these kids, the experience we're engaging them in, the experience we're modeling to them, those things, how we demonstrate our behavior repeatedly is a huge indicator of who they're going to turn into. You'll often hear psychologists or mental health providers say things like what fires together wires together, meaning whatever you see or do most often is the neural pathway that's going to get, I don't know, like born in. So in terms of whole brain strategies, how do we help people, right? The first one, connect to redirect. So if your child is upset or a child that you're interacting with is upset, first connecting emotionally, right brain to right brain. So once they are in more control and more receptive, then you can bring in left brain lessons and discipline, but really kind of connecting, validating that emotion. When they come to us having really big feelings, the least effective thing we can do in that moment is to argue with them about their faulty logic. So the connect and redirect strategy involves physical affection, a really nurturing tone of voice, validating statements. This is an opportunity to allow the child to be heard and cared for, and then briefly address the specific issues that they have been bringing up, because at that point in time, they're more receptive to that problem solving and planning. So by having a better understanding of how children's brains work, we can really create much more cooperation and solution more quickly with less drama. So by connecting with them right brain to right brain, we're able to communicate that we're tuned in to how they're feeling. So when a kid's upset, logic's not going to work. We're not going to be able to supply logic to illogical emotions. We need to meet the emotional need. That's the term for that is attunement. So how can I connect deeply with another person and attune to whatever emotions or experiences that they're having right now? In those moments, you're really treating the child like their feelings are real and they're important. So that lets them to use both sides of their brain in an integrated and coordinated way. The second strategy is name it to tame it. So when big right brain emotions come along and they're raging out of control, helping your kids to tell the story about what's upsetting them. So while you're helping them to do that, they're able to use their left brain to make sense of whatever their experience was and feel more in control. So my kids are 5 and 9, and it's not funny, laughing's not the right response, but my daughter is 5, and so as one can imagine, has very big feelings. And last night at bedtime, she was having very big feelings, and she was extremely dysregulated because she cut the glazer in half, the last donut, because she wanted to share it with her brother and be fair. And her brother had gone ahead and eaten both halves of the glazer, and now he was gone, and she just wanted a bedtime snack, and there were no glazers. And I mean, she was really upset about this. And so we did some naming it to tame it, like, whoa, you're really mad right now. What is going on? What I wanted to do at 8 p.m. was not that. What I wanted to do was to respond very differently. And I'm glad I did it this way because it makes for a really good example to give you guys right now. But I mean, she was really raging out of control. She was absolutely losing her mind over this half of a glazer, as one does at bedtime when you're 5. And so I was like, wow, you are really upset. What is going on? And she is like hyperventilating. She's like, I'm so upset right now. I can't breathe. And I was like, wow, tell me what's the story? What's the deal? Like, you really can't breathe. But I was trying to just get her to breathe, honestly. And then she told me this terrible story about how her brother did this very unfair thing that was extremely unjust when she was just trying to be a good, fair, wonderful little human. Which I was like, you know what? I feel like I would be this dysregulated right now too. So I get it. But as soon as she had told me the story about how unfair it was that her big brother had done this, she was no longer hyperventilating. She was able to say, this is just really, I'm really upset. I really wanted to have that for my snack. And it's not here, right? So we were able to calm her brain down and thankfully come up with a solution to that problem. So the best way to kind of help get that integration for people is to allow them to tell you their story without judgment, you know? And honestly, in that, I would say most times, even with my kids, when they tell me their story, the longer I listen, the more I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'd be really upset about that too if I went out of my way to do something fair and then he went out of his way to do something not fair, you know? Um, so a lot of times what kids need when they're experiencing those really strong emotions is really just to have somebody to help their left brain and their right brain make sense of what's going on, to put things in order. So that might come through just repeating the story back. Like, okay, hang on, let me make sure I get this, you know? So they can put it all in order and turn the volume down on the emotions. So helping them to regulate the bodily sensations, the raw emotions, the personal memories associated with it, that sort of thing. So just assigning a name or a label to what someone is feeling does literally calm down the activity of the emotional circuitry in the brain, and allowing them to do that second space of telling the story is a additional benefit. Engage, don't enrage. So asking yourself throughout the day which part of the child's brain you're appealing to. So instead of enrage, so had I done what I wanted to do, which I really hope there's parents on this call who are not going to judge me. But you know, I mean, I also want to go to bed and I'm all out of dopamine for the day and I'm tired. And I mean, I kind of want a glazer and there's no glazer. So like there's a lot of things happening, you know. And I just want to be like, knock it off. You are fine. This is ridiculous, right? But that would have been engaging and enraging the downstairs brain, and she would have just got louder. So, you know, the self-serving was like, well, I only want to go to bed too. And I know that's not going to get me what I need. So I'm going to engage the downstairs brain by kind of saying like, wow, you are really having a hard time right now. What's going on? What's the deal? Let's breathe. Let's figure it out, you know? Rather than kind of trying to demand that she behave a different way with her emotions at the end of the day. Because if
Liz,
that
I
was the
don't know if you saw in the chat, someone had
oh,
asked, how can we connect to the child when they're having big emotions if they do not respond well to attention?
oh, that's an awesome question. So I have another kid in my life that does this too. You can just borrow them your mirror neurons and your physiology. So I will just share space with my other child who doesn't want attention. So I might like just be like just sitting on the couch, just breathing in their general vicinity, because your mirror neurons and their mirror neurons are gonna sync up. So also just giving them a little bit of space. So if somebody's, you know, blowing up and out of 10, I'm going to provide supervision and like safety, but I might let them in that supervision and safety kind of run themselves down a little bit until they're ready for engagement. Or I might just share space and say like, I'm here when you're ready. But really that message in and of itself is connection, because it says like, I'm not going to just abandon you in the middle of whatever you're going through, but I'm also not going to demand that you engage with me right now. So even honoring like what they need in that moment could be connection for that child, because they know that the adult is respecting whatever their boundary is. So I know that gets a little tricky because we might think of connection as like verbally engaging them or something like that. And it can be just, sometimes I also just narrate for kids like, okay, well, looks like you're having a really tough time and you need a little bit of space. I'm going to be right here when you're ready, and I'll check back in you know, in 10 minutes or something like that. I'm not saying that so that they agree with me or they're accepting of it. I'm saying that because I'm the regulated adult who's letting them know that I'm going to provide safety and supervision, but I'm not saying it in like a threatening or combative way. It's just matter of fact information, just neutral. Thanks, Abby. Let's see. So strategy number 4, use it or lose it. So looking for different ways you and your children can focus on exercising their upstairs brain. So sound decision making, like don't make all decisions for them, no matter how old they are. I mean, honestly, I'm going to keep picking on this Glazers example because one, it might help me process how awful it was, but I think it's just a real life example that people can relate to. If you need teenager examples or something, let me know. I can give you those instead. But sound decision making. So my daughter is losing it last night about this glazer, and I wasn't like, okay, well, here's what we're gonna do, you're gonna eat this instead of that and get over it. Right. I was like, okay, well, wow, validate the feelings. You're really upset about it. And then I said, well, what do you think you want to do right now? And her dad and brother were actually out of the house and on their way home. And she said, can you ask dad if he'll stop and get some for me? Which seemed reasonable enough, given honestly that I was kind of mad at her brother that he had done this to her for like the 40th time. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to have your dad get you some and you're going to have the whole box over the course of the next week. Of course. But I didn't make that decision for her. I just kept saying like, well, what do you think you want to do? Do you want to just have a different snack? What do you want me to do? So let them exercise their brain, and they're gonna sometimes come up with answers that like might not be the way we were gonna do it, but that doesn't make it a bad answer. Let me see. I'm reading this. Oh, this is so smart. Yeah, so what Allison said in the chat is such a big deal. I literally talked to parents about this all week, you guys. I totally know what you mean about like wanting to like make it better for people. And I understand that. And just think about yourself personally. Do you ever come home from work and you're telling someone in your life about what a bad day you had, and then they start telling you what you need to do to fix it for tomorrow? Anyone ever had this experience, right? And the thing that you needed was not to be told how to fix it for tomorrow, because you already know. You already know what you're going to do differently. What you needed was someone to connect with you, to validate your experience. And that's the same thing when and I don't know about you guys, but personally, I am really offended when my husband starts to offer me solutions for tomorrow on how to not do this again, because I am an intelligent human and I know how to solve that problem. I just need to stomp my feet and throw a temper tantrum right now and have you say, wow, honey, that sounds hard. But when you start telling me what to do instead, what I hear is, honey, you're not smart enough to figure this out on your own. And that's essentially what we're doing to our kids, is by jumping in and making it better for them, or trying to get the coach or the teacher or whomever to constantly accommodate these needs, is we're teaching our children that the world should change for them versus helping them figure out how to participate in a world that's not going to do that, right? So it's actually not a very loving thing. I mean, it comes from a loving place, but in the long run, it's harmful. Yeah, that's a super great point. Yeah, and sit in it. God, that's the hardest. I agree. And if it helps anybody at all, I literally will tell myself like 1,000 times a day, like, this is the most loving thing I can do. Or I will say to my kids, I love you too much to solve this for you right now. I trust you to find an answer. Do you want my help, or do you need any ideas? Or this isn't funny, but again, my house is a little bit nuts, you guys, okay? But when I had my son, he would often do things that were like wild and probably fairly concerning, but I would assess like, is he gonna die? And if he wasn't gonna die, I would compare it to some version of 80s parenting that I experienced, and then I would try to find the middle, right? And so my husband had a totally different approach, which was like helicopter parenting. And like, he didn't want to let my son do anything. And I was like, I think, which of the two of us, you would never expect it to be this way. But so I would just say to my son, that looks like a bad idea, but if you want to try it, looks like a bad idea. And so then he got to the point where he would say, Mom, is this a bad idea? Which is that use it to lose it, right? He started exercising his brain to decide, like, I'm gonna weigh the pros and cons here. And now then his sister comes along and she's born, and he's a few years older than her. And then he would say things like, oh, Clara, that looks like a bad idea. And I thought, my job here is done. These two can raise each other. It's going to be just fine, right? I mean, I think we go out of our way to do a lot of things for our kids that is on us. Like, we're underestimating their ability rather than letting them flex those muscles and grow a little bit there. Let's see. And then the other part of use it to lose, or whoops, that's not the right button. Let's see. I got too many keyboards here, guys. Is kind of that physiological, like helping them take deep breaths or express their feelings or stomp their feet. So that example of like, how do I connect with my kid when they aren't ready for the attention? Like, not obnoxiously, but I might just share space and like, or when my daughter was losing it, she was blowing out the candles. I mean, she was kind of hyperventilating, but we had previously practiced, like for little kids, you're going to blow out the candles on the cake, right? Or with my son, we'll just do like, or like whatever weird thing. And sometimes I just do it and they think I'm insane, but then they do it anyway. Or I'll say, do you need to stomp your feet? Do you need to yell and scream right now? And then the other part of the fourth strategy, use it or lose it, is self-understanding. So asking them questions that help them look beyond the surface of whatever it is they understand. So like, why do you think you made that choice? Or what do you think made you feel that way? Or when I'm really worried about like if my kids are going to be the like rude kid in class or at a friend's house or something like that, I'll kind of ask stories about the school day and how everybody was treating each other. And then I'll kind of say like, well, what did you think about that? Do you think that was the right way for, so-and-so to respond? Or what do you think they should have done? So it's like also taking it one step away from your kid in case they might have done, an emotionally driven behavior that they feel bad or embarrassed about, moving it one step out so they can reflect on it and understand. Empathy, so asking simple questions that encourage consideration of another person's feelings. So, why do you think they did that? What do you think's going on? How do you think they felt when nobody sat by them? And then morality. So when kids can make sound decisions while controlling themselves and working from an empathy and self-understanding point, they'll develop a really robust and active sense of morality. And so kind of having a greater sense of right and wrong and a sense of greater good beyond whatever their own individual needs are. I love to offer hypotheticals to my kids, like kids like my teenagers here at work and my own kids, like, well, what do you think we should do or you would do if X, Y, and Z happened? Because most of the time parents will give them the lecture, like it was prom this past weekend. And so parents are inclined to be like, well, don't drink, don't do drugs, don't, like give the lecture, right? Instead of saying like, well, what are you going to do if there's people drinking? Or what's your plan if everybody wants to leave and go do X, Y, and Z? So you're predicting the possibility that it might happen while also trusting your kids to have some thought process for that. Move it or lose it. So when your kiddo has lost contact with the upstairs brain, helping them regain balance by having them move their body. So moving your body helps the amygdala calm down and kind of unlatch that gate to the upstairs brain. So we can get back online with this part of our brain. So when we change our physical state through movement or relaxation, we can change our emotional state. So even like smiling or just releasing a big breath or like I was telling you guys, like we'll just like, those are physical movements that just reset you. So whatever works, swings, running around the house. Sometimes I'll just tell my kids, like, do a couple laps around the kitchen table and come back in here. I don't need to explain why I'm having them do it, depending on the age they are. But get them up and moving. If these are teenagers, then it might just be like literally stand up and stretch. Let's move our bodies, because they've been sitting in a stagnant position for quite a while. And if they're littler kids, I do this a lot with my daughter. Actually, I do it with my son too, now that I think about it. But I'll sometimes just like grab their arms and just like move them and wiggle them or like throw their arms around, because you would do it with babies, right? But once you do it with bigger kids, it's kind of silly. And so when you start doing it with them, they're like, oh, you're so ridiculous, mom. Yes, true. And we just moved your body, so you're not a 10 anymore. And now we can go back to talking about why you think you were mad or what you want to do about it. Now, I'm not going to just like go embrace them in this hug or this silly goof around when they're a 10 and aren't ready for that, but it's a way you can incorporate it. And then using the remote of the mind. So this is a way to help your kiddo integrate implicit and explicit memories. So one of the best ways to promote integration is for people to tell stories. So that's true of integrating implicit and explicit memories, but sometimes kids aren't really ready or able to process all parts of a memory. So allowing them to like retell a story where some parts might be missing or retell a story with the parts they're willing to share, allowing them to pause or fast forward that story as much as they want to or need to. to review and rewind. If they need your help filling in the missing parts for them, if they're open to that, that can be helpful. But the more that they're able to tell stories like, I told my daughter something that had happened to me in second grade, and she has literally asked me to repeat the story probably 15 times in the last 3 weeks because she's trying to make sense of, like, one, me as a 40-year-old parent, I was in second grade one time. And then also, like, how did I handle this teacher that wasn't nice to me? And how do I talk to people when they're unkind and things like that? So the goal is kind of like taking all the messy puzzle pieces that are all jumbled up and then helping make a whole picture with clarity and meaning. So allowing like pausing and fast forwarding lets them have some control over what they're dealing with and the pace that they're dealing with it, so they can interact with it when they're ready and capable without having to like immediately relive something in a scene for scene kind of a way. Oh, I'm sorry, you guys. See, that's what happens when you're up arguing about blazers. Let's see. Remember to remember. So, making recalling information part of your family's daily life. So memory, just like many other functions in the brain, becomes stronger the more that you use it. So things that fire together wire together, right? And when you give kids a lot of practice at remembering by having them tell and retell their own stories, you improve their ability to integrate implicit and explicit memories. So, helping your kids talk about their experiences during everyday activities. So, if you say to your kids, like, well, what'd you learn in school today? And inevitably they'll be like, nothing, Well, who'd you talk to? Oh, well, what they think of the math homework today, or what they think of the history assignment, or, these kinds of things. They're just different ways to ask questions that allow them to remember, and then improve that integration. Or like if you're on your drive somewhere, like remembering the last time you came to that place, talking about important friendships or rites of passage, asking things like what happened when, or follow up on a problem they were having. So last week was MCAs for my kids. I think Rochester kids are doing MCAs this week. So, how are they feeling about it? That sort of thing. And connecting that remember to remember process to another daily ritual can be really good, like highs and lows at dinner, or reviewing memories when you're taking certain trips in the car, that sort of thing. If they're really struggling with talking about a past experience, one of the best things that you can do is to help them retell the story of that experience. Strategy 8, let the clouds of emotion roll on by. So helping kids to learn that feelings are temporary. They're changing conditions, just like the rain and the snow and the sun. So really helping children to learn that these are states, not traits, because they're in that, limbic system brain. When they are feeling angry or overwhelmed, it genuinely feels like it's going to last forever. And when they're in that state of mind, you're not going to be able to tell them like, this won't last forever. That's like the least helpful thing you could do at that point in time. So when they are in a more regulated place, right, kind of understanding like rain is real, and it would be silly to stand out in the rain as if it weren't raining, but it would also be silly to behave as though the sun's never going to come out again. So, sadness is real, and it's not helpful to live as though you're never going to feel sadness. So, to whomever had written that comment earlier about like wanting to fix it, right? So if we constantly fix it so that they don't feel sad, we've actually created a different problem, because now we're sort of messaging that like it's not okay to feel sad when they're inevitably going to have it. So just like the rain is going to come sometimes and we need to be able to do puzzles in the house, sadness is going to come sometimes, and it's okay to just like lay on the couch and watch Netflix for a day, but don't unpack and live there, And if kids don't understand this differentiation, I have a lot of kids right now who become like suicidal because they're bored. They don't know how to do bored because they've never had to practice tolerating just sitting, or like not being constantly stimulated. So, I mean, it shows up in a lot of ways that we might not be considering. And then strategy 9 is SIFT. So in order for kids to develop mindsight and then influence the different thoughts, desires, and emotions whirling around and within them, they first need to become aware of what it is they are actually experiencing. So finding ways to work with this concept during your daily interactions with your kids. One of the best ways to begin orienting kids to what's on like their, Daniel Siegel uses like a rim and a hub message, but to help kind of orient them to what's on their rim is to learn the SIFT, which is sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts that are affecting them. And also working with teenagers, I think it's super important to help build people's ability to recognize sensations within their bodies are messages about what they are feeling. So if you can get better at that, you can recognize it earlier, and then we could intervene earlier instead of like, I have chronic stomach pain, you know, you might intervene a little bit before it gets to that. Exercise mindsight. So when kids become fixated on one set of points along their wheel of awareness, we need to help them shift their focus so that they can become more integrated. So instead of just seeing things one way, that they don't have to be the victims of whatever their sensations, images, and feelings and thoughts are, and they can choose how to think and feel about their experiences. So if I recognize that I sort of have chronic stomach aches and it's likely anxiety, then I can also work on how I think about going to school, which is going to impact how my stomach feels, because I'm going to start thinking about going to school in a more logical or problem solution manner, which is going to help my stomach feel better because I'm not going to be anxious all the time, for instance. This does not come naturally to kids, so they have to be taught how to do it. They have to be taught what to spend their time and attention on. And those exercises can really lead to integration, because where you focus your attention, neurons fire and wire together. So helping them kind of do each of these steps that I'm talking about is a way to get those neurons wiring and firing together. Strategy 11, increase the family fun factor. You know, I don't know about you guys, but between all the things, sometimes we just forget to like connect. We're just like constantly running from one appointment to the next appointment, or practice or homework or whatever. So finding ways within those transitions to have fun. Because really all people are hardwired for play and exploration and joining and connection with one another. And all of these previous strategies that I've talked about, they are things that you can do to have fun on the way to and from school to practice or whatever it may be. Playful parenting is one of the best ways to prepare your children for relationships and to encourage them to connect with others. It gives them positive experiences being with people they spend most of their time with. So play games, tell jokes, be silly, take an interest in what they care about. I can tell you guys, I know more about Fortnite right now than I care to. And also I get to spend a lot of time with my 9-year-old. And by I know more than I care to, I mean, I've been told more than I care to have been told. I stored basically none of it, but I got to hang out with him and be like, oh, that's really cool. Super like that skin. That's really awesome. Love that. No idea. And I also learned a lot about Barbies this weekend and Rainbow High and all these things that I probably would have rather not, but it was fun to be like silly and funny, goofy, and enjoy each other, right? So the more you can play, the more they're going to learn to value those relationships, desire more positive and healthy relational experiences in the future. And each positive experience you give them while they're part of your family is going to provide them with positive reinforcement about what it means to be in a loving relationship with other people when they move out of your family. So if you really, really want to develop close long-term relationships between your kids, think of it like a math equation where the amount of enjoyment that they share together should be greater than the amount of conflict they experience. So that's true in the sibling relationship and the parent-child relationship. And then the last one, connect through conflict. Conflict is inevitable. This happens. We're not doing our kids any good by trying to protect them from conflict. So what we want to do is teach our children the basic mindset skills they need so that they're going to know how to manage conflict in healthy and productive ways and respond when things don't go perfectly as they interact with others. again, I was just doing group before I came in here, and we were talking about like, how strongly do you say no to something? And what are the sort of variables to consider in that? Like priorities, give and take, timeliness, you know, these different things. But if we're constantly solving things for other people, we're kind of modeling that that's their job too. And if somebody's asking my 14-year-old to do something that they don't really want to do, but I've always made it so that they don't have to do the thing they don't want to do, like they might feel like they have to pass that on, right? Instead of if I teach them how to disagree effectively while still being in relationship with one another, like, you know, hey, well, I'll use the example of prom, like, hey, that's, you know, drinking after prom isn't really for me. I don't have judgments about if you do it, whatever, that's on you, but I'm going to go ahead and go here because that's what I'm going to do. So kind of affirming for kids that it's okay to disagree and people survive it. In order to affirm that, they're going to have to practice disagreeing with somebody, mainly you. So how you handle that is going to have everything to do with how they manage it in the future. I'm going to just pause right here and see if anybody has like thoughts, feelings, opinions. I really just wanted to get through the 12 strategies. If I start delving into the rest, I think it can get a little overwhelming and we don't really have enough time. So what are you all thinking?
I was having a thought about like the connecting through conflict. Like how do you manage like child disagreeing with you and or like you disagreeing with them and avoiding power struggles?
Mm-hmm. Well, if this doesn't land for people, tell me, but I'm always kind of struck by, I don't need to get into a power struggle with you because ultimately, like, I am the adult as I'm sitting here with my arms crossed, you know, but like, I'm not going to get you to be really appreciative of this consequence that I'm putting out. Like, that's just not going to happen. So I don't know why I'm even trying to like kind of convince that, because all I have to do as the regulated adult is decide what's going to happen and share it with you and hear about whatever your opinion is. But I don't have to get dysregulated because your opinion is different than mine. I don't have to convince you to appreciate said consequence, you know, like it just is going to be what it is. And I know you're not going to like it, but I'm also a really safe person for you to get mad at. So like to put this in a real life context, again, laughing is not the right response, but here we are. So with my son, he wants to be on Xbox like all the time. That's like all he wants to do. And I don't love that for him. But his dad might set a limit of like, you have 2 hours, and then his dad will forget what time it is, or he'll like leave or something. And then I'm there, like, I'm pretty sure he's been on his Xbox for like 4 hours or whatever. And then he starts like trash talking me when I want him to come out of his room for dinner or something. So I'll just be like, you know, that's okay. You can continue to talk to me like that. And if you choose to do that, I can just disconnect the Wi-Fi. So you decide, but dinner's on the table and I trust you to make a good decision. And yeah, he's going to be like, you suck and I hate you and rah, rah, rah. But also his brain is dysregulated. So I'm not going to get in there and be like, don't you tell me I suck, because then I'm not helping. And he always comes out. But if I would have been like, listen here, you needed to get off 2 hours ago, like whatever, that's an adult problem. The adults didn't manage that, right? So I think you have to own your own contribution before you try to establish power over the other one, because you already have power by default. There's a hierarchy, unless maybe that wasn't being managed, in which case you're going to have to get through the extinction burst. Are these 12 strategies? Yes, they are. No, it's not bad to walk away and leave, because if I stay, this is really good. If I stay and continue to argue with you, we're both offline. So the biggest, most important thing you can do is model regulation. So if you say, if you say like, I'm leaving, this isn't worth it, we're just yelling, that is not helpful, right? So I can understand the desire to do that, believe me. And what would be most helpful is like, I know you're really upset right now, and this is really important. I'm going to come back in 20 minutes after we both had a little bit of time and space. Or if you're worried that she's going to feel abandoned, I would give the options. Like, do you want me to stay here, stay near right now, or give you some time and space So depending on how, like if they're like 12 or 13 and we're like screaming at each other, I might say like, I need to step away right now. But if we're trying to figure out how to kind of regulate through it and troubleshoot through it, then I would give options. Do you want me to stay here and we'll like talk about this in a little bit when we calm down? Or do you want me to go away and come back in 10 minutes or whatever time frame? We call them forced choices. I think they're really useful. Because sometimes when kids are that mad, they really don't know how to make like an open-ended decision, but they might do well with one or the other. Yeah, other thoughts, questions, opinions? Abby, to answer your power struggle question, I think that's true in adult to adult relationships too. Like to try to remember to prioritize the relationship first over the emotion, right? Like if it's your spouse, like I am with a really good human. There is nothing about this human that makes them terrible. So if I can lead with that, like I married a good human, which also means if I'm not leading with that, then like I have to challenge my own decision-making skills because why did I marry not a good human? Right? Or like with my kids, I'll be like, I am raising good humans. These are good people. And they're driving me nuts right now. But at least if I lead with that, like in my heart, it keeps me from saying the really boneheaded, like, yeah, power struggle commentary. Not that I don't. I mean, there's probably people on this call who know me and they're like, I've seen you do it. But I try not to. And if you do, I don't know if that's on here, but well, I think it's strategy 12. If you do flip your lid and you don't respond very well, go back later on in the day and say, you know what, that was not my finest hour. And I really want to check back in on you and see how we're doing. I didn't handle myself well and I'm sorry. This is what you can expect. This is what I'm going to try to do moving forward. My son and I have to have these conversations like all the time because we are very similar people. And so, and it's gotten to the point where it's like I'll go in his room and say, I'm so sorry. That was not, that I'm not a proud parenting moment. He'll be like, it's all right. I'm not doing very good today either. So there's like much more compassion and empathy versus sometimes parents will be like, I don't want to apologize because they'll think I'm weak or whatever. Like, that's just not what happens. Yeah, I think it's huge. If we want kids to practice apologizing, we have to model it. And like, you really want to walk around with that on your conscience all day? You don't feel good when you know you did something wrong and you don't take ownership of it either. So I know they're not little adults, but like when you really stop and think about the things that you're wanting them to do, if you really reflect, like, am I doing these things? Then if you're not, you've really set your expectation bar way too high for them, because if you're not modeling it, why would they? It's like asking you to do something for somebody that you like really don't respect because they don't. I mean, adult, you know what I mean? Like that sort of thought process of like, as an adult, do I want to go do something for my boss if he's just been super disrespectful to me? No, I want to go be super disrespectful. Now I won't, because also this is a made up story. My boss is not disrespectful, but like kids don't have the breaks, right? So if I'm disrespectful to them, they're going to be disrespectful to me. The only thing that keeps me from doing that as an adult is like, it's done cooking. I got breaks, right? And like bills to pay. I think I saw all the chat questions. Pretty sure. Well, thanks for spending your lunch with me, friends. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Melissa. This is awesome. Great presentation.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. I think if everybody can see, there is a little link to the survey in the chat. You can get CEU credit that way. And this presentation will be uploaded within the month to the Voices website to watch later.
Thanks, Abby. Wow, these are really kind attendees you have. Wow. I'll present next week if you need me to. This is like, the teenagers I work with aren't this nice to me. This is very nice. Oh,
Yeah,
great.
I'll keep the Zoom open for another few minutes if people have other questions for Melissa. But yeah, thanks again. This is excellent.